Let me tell you about the night I stopped trusting the one person I had let myself trust. But before I get there, you need to understand who I was before she came along. Not the professional version. Not the man who sat across conference tables and made financial fraud look simple to explain. The real one, the one who came home to a quiet apartment every night and told himself the quiet was a choice rather than a consequence. My name is Sawyer Brent. I am 36 years old. I grew up in a house in Columbia, South Carolina, where my father went to work before sunrise and came home after dark and sat in his chair and did not talk about his day or his feelings or anything that lived below the surface of practical necessity. He was not a cruel man. He was simply a man who had decided, somewhere early in his life, that the interior of a person was a private room that you kept locked and managed alone. He died at 63 with that room still locked, and at his funeral 3 different people told me they had known him for decades and had never really known him at all. I became him without meaning to. I became him the way children become their parents, gradually, then completely, then with the dawning horror of recognition. I work as a forensic accountant. I find money that people hide. I trace it through the structures they build, the shell companies, the layered transfers, the accounting variances designed to look like noise, and I follow the numerical logic of deception until it becomes undeniable evidence in a format that holds up in court. I am, professionally, a man who does not believe things without verification. I have built a career on the discipline of not being fooled, which is the thing about this story that still catches me off guard when I think about it. The man who found hidden things for a living did not see what was hidden in the apartment above his. Her name was Celeste Harrow. She moved into the second floor of a converted brownstone called the Aldrich in Charleston, South Carolina, on a Thursday in April. I lived on the first floor. I know the specific day because I heard the movers, and because I went out for coffee and came back to find a canvas drop cloth spread carefully across the landing outside the stairwell door. She had put it there before they brought anything in, to protect the original hardwood floor from the dolly wheels. The floor was not hers. She was a new tenant who had been there approximately 40 minutes, and she was already trying to protect something that did not belong to her. I noticed that. I filed it as interesting and went inside. I saw her properly for the first time that evening in the building's small courtyard. A walled garden behind the brownstone with an iron bench and an overgrown jasmine that had been claiming the south wall for about 15 years. She was sitting with a glass of wine and a book she was not reading. Her eyes were moving across the garden in the careful way of someone taking inventory of a new environment, noting what was where and what it meant and what it might mean later. She was around 32. Auburn hair that the late April light caught and made look like something from a painting. She had the kind of face that became more interesting the longer you looked at it. Structured and precise, not soft but not hard either. She was wearing a linen dress and had taken her shoes off and set them beside the bench with the particular ease of someone who had decided, at some point in her life, that performing discomfort was not something she owed anyone. She looked up when I came through the courtyard door. "Downstairs, neighbor," she said. A statement, not a question. "Sawyer," I said. "Celeste." She looked at me with the direct, unhurried assessment of someone deciding whether a person was worth further investment. "I have been told I pace at night. I am going to try not to, but I wanted you to know in advance, in case I fail." "I appreciate the warning," I said. "I will try not to play piano at 6 in the morning." She paused. "Do you play piano?" "No," I said, but the gesture felt appropriate. She looked at me for one more second, the assessment still running, and then she did something I was not expecting. She laughed. Not a polite social laugh. An actual one, the kind that arrives before you decide to let it. Changed her whole face. "Sit down," she said. "I have more wine than one person should have on a Thursday. Before I go further, if you have ever met someone and felt the immediate, inconvenient sense that they were going to matter to you in ways you were not ready for, stay with me. Like this video, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and subscribe to this channel. Because what I am about to tell you about Celeste Harrow, and what she was carrying, and what she was willing to do to survive it. None of it became clear to me until a Tuesday night when she locked my bedroom door and looked at me with those amber eyes, and I felt, for the first time in my professional life, the cold recognition of finding concealment somewhere I desperately did not want to find it. We sat in that courtyard until the wine was gone and the Charleston evening had gone warm and dark around us. She was a contracts attorney at a firm downtown. She negotiated commercial real estate agreements, she said, which meant she spent her days finding the precise language that protected people when things went wrong between them. She talked about legal language the way I talked about financial structures, as architecture, as something built to bear weight. She was funny in the dry, embedded way that I find most interesting. She asked real questions and listened to the real answers. She did not fill silences with noise. By the time I walked back inside, I was already telling myself to be careful, which was itself a sign that I was not going to be. We talked every evening for the first week. Coffee in the morning by the second week. Dinner by the third. It established itself the way certain things do between people who have stopped pretending they do not want more, quietly, without declaration, as a fact rather than a decision. Then one Saturday night I heard a voice through my ceiling. Male. Low. The particular register of a man who was used to being listened to and was currently not getting the response he expected. Her voice underneath it, controlled the way she was always controlled, but with a quality I had not heard before. The sound of someone holding a door closed from the inside through effort rather than ease. The conversation lasted nearly an hour. Then I heard the building's front door. Then her footsteps crossed her apartment and stopped. I stood in my kitchen with a glass of water and looked at the ceiling for a long time. She knocked on my door the next morning at 8:15. Coffee? She said. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table and wrapped both hands around the mug I gave her and looked at it for a moment before she looked at me. And I saw it then, in the small but genuine way that real things show themselves when people are tired of hiding them. She was carrying something large. Not dramatically, just steadily, the way people carry things that have been heavy for so long that the weight has stopped feeling like an emergency and started feeling like weather. I heard some of that last night, I said carefully. I was not trying to. The building is old. How much? She said. Enough to know it was not comfortable. She nodded, held the mug, thought for a moment about something. His name is Donovan Marsh, she said. He was my business partner. And before that, he was someone I loved. She stopped. The business became a legal dispute, and the legal dispute became personal, and the personal became... She looked for the word. Ugly, she said. In ways I will tell you more about when I know you better. That is fair, I said. She looked up. You are not going to push for more than that. Not today, I said. She studied me with those amber eyes. Everyone I know right now either tells me what to do about it or tells me to stop fighting it. You are the first person in months who just listened. I find things for a living by watching and waiting, I said. Pressure usually produces more concealment. She almost smiled. That is either very wise or very calculated. Both, I said. Probably. She stayed for an hour. She told me small things, where she grew up, why she chose contract law, what she actually liked about it. She did not tell me everything about Donovan. She was not ready and I did not push. She left and I stood in my kitchen with 2 empty mugs and felt something shift in the quiet of my apartment. The quiet felt different now, like it was waiting for something, like I was. What I did not know yet, what I would not know for weeks, was that her knocking on my door that morning had not been entirely spontaneous, that there was a reason she had come to me specifically, that the man whose voice I had heard through the ceiling the night before had a plan, and part of that plan had my name in it, and that the woman sitting at my kitchen table, who had made me feel seen for the first time in years, was navigating something far more complicated than I had been given the pieces to understand. The full picture was coming. I just did not know yet how much it was going to cost to see it. Here is the thing about being a man who finds hidden things professionally. You start to believe the skill transfers. You start to believe that because you can read a financial structure and identify the deception embedded in it, you can read people the same way. That the pattern recognition works across categories. It does not. People are not spreadsheets. And the specific kind of person who is genuinely skilled at being known selectively, at giving you exactly enough of the real thing that you stop questioning what you are not being given, that kind of person will walk right through every professional defense you think you have. Celeste walked through mine over the course of about 6 weeks, and I did not feel it happening because it did not feel like infiltration. It felt like being known, which I understand now is the most effective form of entry there is. If you have ever confused being known with being safe, stay right here. Because this is the part of the story where I became someone I did not fully recognize, and the part where the person I was becoming was not only in danger from someone else, but from the version of myself I had not yet examined. By May we were having dinner twice a week. By early June we were talking every day. The evenings on my rear porch became the thing I looked forward to most. The Charleston heat settling into something bearable after 9, the jasmine from the courtyard reaching all the way to the porch rail in good wind, Celeste with her feet tucked under her on the other chair talking about her cases or her past or the particular quality of the light in the harbor at dusk. She told me more about Donovan in pieces over those weeks. How they had met at a firm in Columbia 8 years ago and recognized in each other the same specific ambition. Not for wealth exactly, but for the kind of professional credibility that comes from building something real rather than working inside someone else's structure. How they had started the practice together and built it over 4 years into something that mattered. How the personal relationship had begun inside the professional one and had been, for a while, the best thing she had known. She told me how she had found the billing irregularities. She had been reviewing a quarterly report late on a Friday night, the kind of reviewing you do when you cannot sleep and work feels safer than whatever else you might think about, and something in the distribution column had not added up to what the client ledger showed. She had checked the adjacent quarter. Then the one before that. By 2 in the morning she had 18 months of evidence of systematic extraction through a routing account she had not known existed. She had sat with it for a week before she confronted him. "Why a week?" I asked. She looked at me from the other chair. "Because I was hoping I was wrong," she said. "And because if I was not wrong, confronting him meant losing everything at once. The practice, the income, the person I had organized my life around." She paused. "You tell yourself you are being thorough. Really you are just giving yourself time to grieve a thing that has not officially ended yet." I understood that in a way that had nothing to do with money. "What did he say when you confronted him?" I said. "He said I could accept a restructured agreement giving him control and a reduced stake for myself," she said. "Or he would tell the bar that I had been aware of the irregularities and had signed off on them." She looked at the porch rail. He had built a parallel paper trail. Memos with my signature on them that I had signed as routine administrative documents without reading them closely enough. A pause. He had been building it for months, which meant he had known I would find out eventually. He had been prepared. She said this last sentence with a specific flatness. Not anger, not bitterness, just the clean delivery of a person who has moved past the feeling into the fact because the feeling was too large to carry at full volume. I reached across the space between the chairs and put my hand over hers where it rested on the armrest. I did not say anything. She looked at my hand for a moment and then she turned hers over and held it. That was the first time. It was also, I would later understand, a moment that meant something different to each of us, real to me in the uncomplicated way that touches real when you have been alone in your quiet apartment long enough, and real to her too, I believe genuinely. But layered with something else I could not see from where I was sitting. In late June she came to my apartment with a folder. She set it on my kitchen table and opened it and said she wanted to show me something professional. The folder contained selected documents from the ethics complaint and the financial dispute, the partnership agreement, the distribution summaries showing the routing irregularities, a formal complaint brief. She walked me through them with the precision of someone who had prepared the presentation and knew which documents to show in which order. I looked at the numbers with my professional eye and what I saw confirmed what she had described. The extraction pattern was sophisticated. It was designed to look like variance, like the normal fluctuation of a practice's revenue management, and it would have fooled a general accountant. It did not fool me. "He knows how to structure concealment," I said. "Yes," she said. "He has a very good understanding of how financial oversight works and where its limits are." She looked at me across the table. "You have a very good understanding of how to find it anyway," she said. I held the look. "Is that part of why you knocked on my door with coffee that first Saturday?" I said. "Directly. Because I needed to ask it directly." She held my gaze. She did not flinch. "Yes," she said. "It is part of why." The honesty landed differently than a deflection would have. She had not pretended. And something in me, the part that had learned to distrust smooth answers, found the admission more credible than a denial. "What is the other part?" I said. She looked at her hands for a moment. A rare gesture. She usually held eye contact through everything. "You made me laugh the first night," she said. "Actually laugh. And I had not done that in 8 months. And that mattered to me in a way that was separate from anything practical." I gave her my professional assessment of the documents. I told her what I could verify from the materials she had and what additional documentation would strengthen the case. I told her I would be willing to consult formally as a professional engagement. She said yes. What I did not tell her was what was happening in me that had nothing to do with professional engagement. I had become protective in a way that had no professional basis. I had started tracking Donovan's name in court filings. I had driven past the building where his new practice had relocated, once which I rationalized and a second time which I could not. When she mentioned him in conversation, I felt something proprietary and disproportionate that I was aware enough to identify and not yet honest enough to examine. I had learned emotional distance from my father and spent my adult life wearing it as composure. And now here was a woman dismantling it not by force but by just being consistently, genuinely present. And the dismantling was producing something I did not know what to do with. Something that felt, in its early stages, like the beginning of real attachment and, in its less examined moments, like the beginning of possession. I had given her a key to my apartment. Practically, for the professional consultation. She sometimes needed to access documents when I was out. That was the reason, I told myself. The real reason was that giving her the key meant she could come in whenever she needed to, and some part of me wanted her to be able to do that. Wanted to be the person she came to. Then on a Tuesday evening in July she came through the front door with her key, and I heard her moving through the apartment differently than usual. Not toward the kitchen or the porch but toward the back hallway. Toward the bedroom. I heard the door close. And then I heard the lock. I stood in the living room and did not move for a full 10 seconds. Then I walked to the bedroom door. Tried it. Locked. Celeste, I said. One moment. Steady. Controlled. Always controlled. I heard movement. The particular sound of a drawer being opened. Then closed. Then the lock turned and the door opened and she was standing there with her coat still on and her hands at her sides and those amber eyes meeting mine with something in them I had never seen there before. Not guilt exactly. Not fear. Something more deliberate than either. The look of someone who has made a decision and is standing on the other side of it. What were you doing? I said. I needed a moment, she said. I am sorry. I should not have. In my bedroom, I said. Locked. Can we sit down? She said. I want to tell you something. We sat. She told me Donovan had made a settlement offer that day. Financial recovery in exchange for withdrawing the ethics complaint and signing a non-disclosure. She said she needed to think. She said sometimes she needed a space that was not hers to think in. She said she was sorry for using the bedroom without asking. And every word of it was precise, complete, plausible, and it told me almost nothing. I sat across from her in my living room and felt it for the first time. The thing I had been building a career on feeling in other contexts. The particular cold recognition of finding concealment in a place you have been choosing not to look. She was hiding something, and I was in love with her. And those two facts were sitting in my living room at the same time and I did not know, in that moment, which one was going to survive the other. I waited 3 days before I looked at the drawer. Not because I needed 3 days to decide to look. Because I needed 3 days to prepare for what I might find, which is something I had never needed before in a professional context and which told me clearly how unprofessional this had become. While Celeste was at her office on Friday morning, I went into my bedroom and I examined the document drawer with the same methodical attention I brought to financial records. I kept physical documents at a consistent angle, a habit from years of working with evidence that required chain of custody. The documents were in the correct order. The angle was off by 12 degrees throughout, consistently, which meant someone had removed them, reviewed them, and replaced them carefully but without knowledge of the specific way they had been stored. Someone who was being careful but not careful enough. I sat on the edge of my bed and held the information the way you hold something that is heavier than you were expecting. The documents in that drawer included preliminary findings from an active forensic engagement. A Charleston commercial real estate firm called Grenway Holdings that had retained me 4 months ago because their CFO, a methodical woman named Greta Fenn, suspected irregularities in the fee structures being administered by their legal counsel. Their legal counsel was Donovan Marsh. I did not move from the edge of the bed for a long time. I just sat there in my bedroom in the Friday morning light, a man who found hidden things for a living, sitting very still with the thing he had found. Then I called Greta. I told her there had been a potential breach of my document security. I told her the nature of what may have been accessed. She was quiet for long enough that I could hear her breathing. If Marsh knows the scope of what you have found, she said, he can move the funds before you have the complete picture. Yes, I said. And the person who accessed your files, she said. What is their connection to him? I looked at the bedroom doorway. I am still working out the full shape of that, I said. I want to tell you what the next few hours felt like because I think the human experience of it matters more than the procedural sequence. I sat in my apartment and I held two versions of Celeste Harrow in my mind simultaneously, and both of them were real, and I could not make them resolve into a single person yet. There was the woman who had laughed in the courtyard at a piano joke and held my hand on the porch and told me that small moments were the only ones that mattered. And there was the woman who had come into my apartment with a key I had given her out of something that was not entirely practical and had gone through a drawer I had not shown her and had done it carefully, deliberately, with the focus of someone who knew what she was looking for. Both of those women were Celeste Harrow. I knew that. I just did not yet know in what proportion, or which one had been there first. I called her that evening. I asked her to come down. She came in 12 minutes, which was fast enough to tell me she had been waiting for the call. She sat on my couch and looked at me with the amber eyes and waited. She did not fill the silence with preemptive explanation. She waited, which was the behavior of someone who had decided to let me set the terms of whatever was about to happen. Tell me about Donovan's current legal clients, I said. A small pause. Why? Because someone accessed my bedroom files 3 days ago, I said. And I need to understand why. She looked at me, not away at me. And for the first time since I had known her, the controlled surface showed something that was not strategy. Something that was just a person, caught at the exact moment they had been moving toward honesty but had not yet arrived. He contacted me 6 weeks ago, she said, before the settlement offer. He knew I had been in contact with a forensic accountant. He said if I was building a parallel financial case against him through a private engagement, he would escalate the ethics proceeding in ways that would be professionally catastrophic for me. She looked at her hands. He said if I found out what you had on his client and shared it with him, he would drop the counter-allegation entirely. So you came to me, I said. He sent me to you, she said. Originally, he knew your name from professional circles. He told me to make contact. The room was so quiet I could hear the jasmine outside moving in the evening wind. And the courtyard, I said. The first evening. That was the first approach, yes? She said. And everything after that. She held my gaze. She did not look away, which I understood was costing her something. Everything after that became something else, she said. I cannot prove that to you. I do not have documentation for it. But it is true. What did you take from the drawer? I said. Nothing, she said. I read what I could in the time I had. I did not remove anything and I did not transmit anything. You did not transmit anything, I said. Past tense. I have not told him what I read, she said. And I was deciding whether I was going to. Why haven't you? I said. When not telling him means losing his protection in the ethics proceeding. She looked at me for a long moment. And in that moment I saw something that I do not have a clean word for, the expression of a person who has been operating from a plan and has, somewhere along the way, made the mistake of genuinely feeling something, and is now standing in the gap between those two facts with nowhere comfortable to stand. Because I did not want to, she said. Because you showed up in ways I was not expecting someone to show up. And because doing it would have meant using you in a way that... She stopped. Started again. I have been used. I know what it feels like. And I did not want to do it to you. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I looked at it. A text from Greta Finn. Marsh just filed an emergency motion against Celeste Harrow. He named you as a co-party, Sawyer. Claims coordinated misconduct. Filed 40 minutes ago. Celeste's phone buzzed at the same moment. She looked at it. Something moved across her face that was not managed or contained. Genuine shock. The raw kind. He filed, she said, quietly, almost to herself. He did not wait for you to give him anything, I said. He already had enough without me, she said. She was working through it in real time. I could see it, the methodical mind moving through the implications quickly. He used my access to you as the architecture. Whether or not I gave him information, the fact that I had accessed your files gives him the allegation. She looked at me. He was not offering me a deal. He was building a case. And I was the material. I looked at the woman sitting on my couch, the woman who had come to me with a strategy and had made the mistake of becoming real somewhere in the middle of it. The woman who had been used by the man she had trusted most, and who had then, in trying to survive it, come close to doing the same thing to me. She was not innocent. Neither was she simply guilty. She was a person in a difficult situation who had made choices I could not entirely defend and had, somewhere along the way, stopped being willing to make the worst one. That did not resolve anything. But it was the truth. And I had built my career on the truth being worth finding even when it was complicated. You need to call Franklin Crowe, I said. Tonight. I know, she said. And Celeste, I said. She looked at me. After this is over, I said. All of it. We are going to have the full conversation. About the beginning and the middle and the locked door and everything you chose not to do. All of it. She nodded. I know, she said. I owe you that. You owe me the truth, I said. Not because I am owed it professionally. Because I would like to know who you actually are. She held my gaze with something that was not the Amber assessment. Something closer to the person underneath it. I would like you to know that too, she said. And then she called her lawyer. And the war began. The hearing convened on a Monday morning in a federal building on Meeting Street, in a room that smelled like institutional carpet and the specific anxiety of people who had come to say things they could not take back. I want to tell you what it felt like to walk into that room as a man rather than as a professional. Because those are two different experiences and most accounts of legal proceedings only describe one of them. Walking in as a professional, I understood the structure. I had testified in proceedings before. I knew the rhythm of formal questioning, the way a well-prepared attorney builds a narrative through evidence rather than assertion, the specific patience required to let the material do the work rather than trying to force the outcome. Walking in as a man, I was aware of Celeste sitting at the respondent's table with her back straight and her hands folded and the controlled surface she always maintained. I was aware that she had been awake most of the weekend preparing with Franklin. I was aware that she had texted me at 2 in the morning on Saturday, not about the case, just 2 words. Thank you. And that I had held my phone in the dark of my apartment for a long time before I texted back. Still here. Those 2 things, the professional and the personal, sat in the same body in a federal hearing room on Meeting Street, and I had to hold both of them without letting one contaminate the other. Donovan Marsh's motion was elegant in the way that things are elegant when they have been built with care rather than grown from fact. It alleged that Celeste, in coordination with me, had orchestrated a scheme to access confidential information from Marsh's current legal clients, and that this constituted not only grounds to dismiss her ethics complaint but grounds to initiate disbarment proceedings against her. He had taken the thing she had actually done, accessing my files at his direction, removed himself from the instruction, and reframed it as her initiative, her misconduct, her scheme. He had not lied exactly. He had edited the story until it told a different truth. I recognized the technique. I had seen it in financial fraud dozens of times, the art of removing yourself from the sequence while leaving the evidence that supports the version you want believed. It was sophisticated, and it was the work of a man who had known Celeste long enough to know exactly which piece of her behavior he could isolate and reframe. Franklin Crowe presented the defense with the efficiency of someone who had spent 40 years watching exactly this kind of construction and had learned to dismantle it at the foundation rather than arguing with its details. He walked the panel through the timeline. He presented the communication record showing Donovan's direction to Celeste 6 weeks before the motion. The text messages, a voicemail, an email sent from an account Donovan used for communications he did not want associated with his firm. He established clearly that the access to my files had been initiated at Donovan's instruction, as part of a strategy he had developed, for purposes that served his interests. Then he presented my testimony. I sat in the witness chair and I answered questions. I told the panel what had been in the drawer. I told them how I had determined it had been accessed. I told them what Celeste had and had not transmitted. And then Donovan's attorney, a sharp, unhurried woman named Patterson, asked me the question she had been building toward. Mr. Brent, she said, in your professional assessment, did Ms. Harrow's access to your files constitute an attempt to obtain information that could benefit her in the ethics dispute with Mr. Marsh? The access was consistent with that intent, I said. Whether that intent was the governing one, I cannot testify to. Can you tell this panel? She said carefully. Whether you believe Ms. Harrow's personal relationship with you was genuine or strategic in its origins? Franklin objected, sustained. But the question was in the room, and everybody felt it. I looked at Celeste. She was looking at the panel table, not at me, and I saw in the set of her shoulders the particular tension she carried when she was holding something together through will rather than ease, that she was not performing composure. She was actually genuinely afraid. The difference between those two things had taken me weeks to learn to read, and reading it clearly now in a federal hearing room told me something I had not expected it to tell me. I knew her well enough to know when she was real. That was what the months of morning coffee and evening porch and locked bedrooms and difficult truths had produced. Not certainty about her choices. Certainty about who she was underneath them. What turned the hearing was not testimony. It was a document. Greta Fenn, with the quiet determination of a woman who had watched her firm's finances be exploited for 2 years and was done being patient about it, authorized the release of my complete forensic findings. Not the partial view Celeste had accessed. The full picture, 4 months of work, every transfer, every LLC, every routing account. Franklin introduced it as evidence that Donovan Marsh had moved a significant sum offshore in the 48 hours following his own emergency filing. A movement that required prior knowledge that a forensic investigation existed. But Celeste had not told him what she had read. The record established she had not transmitted anything, which meant he had gotten the information another way. Franklin presented a second document, an internal email from Greta's firm, subpoenaed from Donovan's IT records. It had been sent by a paralegal at Grenway Holdings, containing a summary of internal conversations in which my forensic engagement had been discussed. The paralegal had been placed at Greta's firm through a staffing agency connected to a Donovan Marsh LLC. He had not needed Celeste to access my files. He had someone inside my client's organization already. He had sent Celeste to me not for the information, for the appearance, for the material that would construct the allegation when he needed it. The panel recessed. The room rearranged itself in the particular way that rooms rearrange when something significant has shifted and everybody is recalibrating. In the hallway, Celeste stood near the window looking at Meeting Street. I came and stood beside her. We did not speak immediately. The July heat was visible even through the glass, rising off the pavement, making the air above the street shimmer slightly. "He built the whole thing," she said quietly. "The deal he offered me, the access to your files. All of it was to create the allegation." "Yes," I said. "He knew I would do it," she said. "He knew I was desperate enough." She was not looking at me. "He used my desperation and my access to you and built something out of it, even though I never actually gave him anything." "He knows you well," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "He used to," she said. "He knew who I was 2 years ago. He did not account for who I became in the process of fighting him." I looked at her profile in the hallway light. This woman who had come to me with a strategy and had, somewhere in the space of morning coffees and evening porches, made the decision to be something more than what the strategy required. Not a perfect decision, not even a clean one, but a human one, the kind that cost something. "Celeste," I said. She turned. "When this is over," I said, "I still want the full conversation. All of it from the beginning. Not because I need to assign fault. Because I want to know you properly. The whole version, not the selected one." She looked at me with the amber eyes and something in them that had been building for months and was now simply present without management or containment. "Yes," she said. "All of it. I promise." The panel reconvened. The findings took 35 minutes. The panel dismissed Donovan's motion. They dismissed it on the full record, the evidence of the planted paralegal, the financial movement the forensic findings exposed, and the established absence of any transmission from Celeste to Donovan of the information she had accessed. The ethics complaint she had originally filed was remanded to formal disciplinary proceedings. Donovan's license was suspended pending that process. The financial fraud became a matter for federal regulators with the full documentation Greta had authorized. I am going to tell you what the afternoon felt like after that, because the legal resolution is the structure and the afternoon is the thing that actually mattered. Celeste and I walked out of the Meeting Street building into the July heat, and stood on the sidewalk while Charleston moved around us. Tourists and office workers and the particular afternoon energy of a city that does not slow down for other people's difficult days. We stood there and neither of us said anything for a moment. Not because there was nothing to say, because there was too much and neither of us wanted to reach for the wrong thing first. "What happens now?" she said. "To the air, not specifically to me." "Legally," I said. "Federal regulators carry it from here. Franklin handles the disciplinary proceeding. Greta pursues civil recovery." "I did not mean legally," she said. "I know you didn't," I said. She turned and looked at me. Really looked, in the direct and unhurried way she had looked at things since the first evening in the courtyard. But without the assessment this time. Without the calculation. Just the person behind both of those things, looking at another person, and not hiding it. "I owe you the full accounting I promised," she said. "And I want to give it to you. Not to manage what you think of me, just because I am tired of any part of us being something other than what it is." "When you are ready," I said. "Now," she said. "If you are willing." We walked. There is a park along the Battery in Charleston where the harbor opens up and the light comes off the water in the late afternoon in a way that makes everything look slightly more significant than it ordinarily does. We walked there and we sat on a bench and she told me everything. In the order it happened, without the managed version. The beginning, Donovan calling her 3 weeks before she moved into the Aldrich and telling her about me and what I did and suggesting that proximity to a forensic accountant with an active engagement involving his firm could be professionally useful. Her initial agreement, born from 8 months of being outmaneuvered and running out of options. The move into 4B chosen partly for its proximity to my apartment. The courtyard, the first evening, the assignment she had gone into with a clear professional objective and the piano line that had made her actually laugh for the first time in months and the way that laugh had sat with her afterward as evidence that something in the approach had already become complicated. The weeks after, the morning coffees and the evening porches and the folder of documents she had brought me, which had been partly calculated and had also been, genuinely, the most honest she had been with anyone about what Donovan had done. She said she had told herself she could maintain the separation between what she needed from me professionally and what she was beginning to feel. She said she had been wrong and that being wrong about it had felt, for the first time in a very long time, like something she did not regret. The locked bedroom. She had come that Tuesday evening not to think about the settlement offer, but because Donovan had contacted her that afternoon and asked for what she had found. She had gone to my apartment with the intention of retrieving something from the drawer. She had stood in my bedroom with the drawer open and the documents in her hands, and she had put them back. She had stood there for several minutes after, in the quiet of a room that was not hers, in the home of a man who had been patient with her in ways she had not earned, and she had put them back and locked the door not to hide from me but to give herself 30 seconds where the decision was made and she did not have to keep making it. "You put them back," I said. "I put them back," she said. "Because of the piano line," I said. She almost smiled. "Among other things," she said. I sat with everything she had given me and I did not try to resolve it quickly. That was new for me, the willingness to sit with complexity without forcing it into a verdict. I had spent my career making things clear and definitive and admissible. I was learning slowly that people were not cases, that the full picture of a person was not a finding. It was an ongoing document. "I want to tell you something," I said, "about myself. Since we are doing the full accounting." She looked at me. "I became possessive before I had any right to be," I said. "When you mentioned Donovan in conversation, I felt things that were not proportionate. I drove past his building. I set alerts on his name in court systems that had nothing to do with your engagement with me." I paused. I told myself it was protective. What it actually was a man who had finally found something he was afraid of losing and had responded by starting to treat it like something he owned. I held her gaze. I did not examine that in real time. I should have. She was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me that?" she said. "Because you told me everything," I said. "And because I want you to know who I actually am too. Not just the patient, professional version. The one who drives past buildings and sets alerts and does not want to examine what that means." She looked at the harbor for a moment. The light was doing its late afternoon thing, gold and serious across the water. "We are both works in progress," she said. "Significantly," I said. "Is that something you can live with?" she said. "In another person." I thought about my father, about the locked interior room and the man who had managed it alone until it killed him, about the version of me that had moved into the Aldrich building intending to be fine with the quiet and had found, 6 weeks after a woman moved in upstairs, that the quiet was not what I thought it was. I have been trying to live with it in myself, I said. I think trying to live with it in another person might actually be easier. You have someone to check in with. She looked at me. The amber eyes were clear in a way I had not seen before. Not assessing, not managing, just present. I would like to be the person you check in with, she said. You already are, I said. You have been for a while. She leaned against my shoulder the way people lean when they have decided something and are done performing the process of deciding. I put my arm around her in the straightforward way of a man who has learned, late and imperfectly, that the things worth having are not worth pretending you do not want. The months after were the slow and honest work of two people building something on a foundation that had started crooked and been leveled with considerable effort. There were mornings that were easy and evenings that required patience, and one conversation in August that lasted 4 hours and ended with both of us tired and clearer than we had been before, which is the only honest measure of whether a difficult conversation has been worth having. Donovan's license was revoked in November. I sat with Celeste in Franklin's office when the final ruling came through and watched her read it with the expression of someone absorbing the end of something that has been too long in ending. Not triumph, not relief exactly, but the particular quiet of a weight that has been set down and whose absence you are still learning to feel. On a Friday evening in December, she came downstairs with a bottle of wine and nothing else. No folder, no agenda, no professional subtext. She sat in the courtyard on the iron bench where I had first seen her and poured 2 glasses and looked at the garden with the same assessing eyes she had been using since April.
He sat beside her.
What are you looking for? I said. Nothing, she said. I am just looking. That is new, I said. She turned and looked at me and smiled. The real kind, the one that arrived before she decided to let it, the one that had been the first true thing I had known about her on the first evening we had shared wine. Yes, she said. It is. I covered her hand with mine where it rested on the bench between us. She turned her hand over and held it. The moment my neighbor locked my bedroom door behind her, I knew something was wrong. I was right. Something was wrong. She had come into my home with a plan and a key I had given her and an objective that had nothing to do with love. That was all true. What was also true was that she had stood in my bedroom with the documents in her hands and put them back, and had sat in my kitchen for months telling me small true things, and had laughed at a piano joke in a courtyard and held on to that laugh because it was the first real thing that had happened to her in 8 months, and had walked into a federal hearing room and sat with her hands folded and her back straight and carried the weight of a very hard situation without asking me to carry it for her, but had let me be there while she carried it, which is its own kind of asking and its own kind of trust. She came to me as a strategy. She stayed as something else. I had built my career on finding the truth inside the thing that was hiding it. I found her the same way, the real version, the complicated, imperfect, entirely genuine version. It was the best thing I had ever found.